Welcome everyone this evening to this meeting of the Winchester Town Forum. The time is 6 p.m. As normal, this meeting is being held under the regulations which came into force on the 4th of April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 situation. My name is Councillor Kathleen Becker, the chairperson of the forum. There are a few housekeeping reminders to run through as there are these revised working practices still in response to the regulations. First of all, can everyone please ensure that microphones remain muted and cameras are switched off whilst you're not addressing the meeting. This reduces background noise and avoids any unintentional disturbances. This meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website, and a video recording will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Members and officers, where appropriate for each item, please use the chat function to indicate that you wish to speak or raise a point of order, and I'll invite you then to speak at the appropriate time. Everyone will be invited to speak in turn, so please do keep contributions as clear and concise as possible. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please make sure that you reference the page or the paragraph number. And the duration of this meeting is planned for 2 hours. If anyone wants to leave at any point, please just indicate in the chat and we will announce to the meeting that you are leaving. Please, can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to undertake a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Members, I'll do a roll call in alphabetical order. If you could unmute your microphones and turn your cameras on and just confirm attendance, please. Councillor Becker, I can see and hear. Councillor Krask.
Present.
Councillor Ferguson.
Good evening. Present.
Had apologies from Councillor Green. Councillor Hiscock.
Good evening. Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Hutchison.
Good evening. I'm here also.
Councillor Lurney.
Good evening. I'm present.
Councillor Mather.
Good evening. Present.
Councillor Murphy.
Good evening. I'm present.
Councillor Scott.
Good evening. Present.
Councillor Thompson.
Good evening, I'm present.
Councillor Todd.
Good evening, present.
And Councillor Weir.
Good evening, present.
Chair, that's all members of the Town Forum present, with apologies from Councillor Green. While I've got the microphone, would you like me to carry on with officers present?
Yes, please.
As well as officers present, Chair, I've noticed we've got a few other councillors join the meeting. So far I've seen Councillor Evans, Councillor Porter and Councillor Cook, and we're expected to be joined by Councillor Bell as well. Officers present this evening are Richard Botham, Dave Ingram and Phil Tidridge for item 8, Dave Shaw and myself from Democratic Services. External organisations share, we've got Paul Sackwell, the Chief Executive Officer for the Hampshire Cultural Trust, has joined us. And we've also got Ben Riley and Andy Wren from Hampshire County Council in relation to item 7. And finally, 2 members of the public join us this evening, Emma Back, Winchester Sport and Leisure Trust, and James Bayfo. Thank you, Chair. That's my roundup. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that moves us swiftly on to disclosures of interests. Does anyone have an interest that they need to disclose tonight?
Yes, Chair. I'm a county councillor, and some of the issues, indeed, one of the issues is it being presented by county council officers. So it's a personal but not a prejudicial interest.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. And Councillor Hiscock.
Yes, please, Chair. I'd like to make the same declaration of interest as Councillor Todd. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I don't have any announcements this evening, other than my laptop is giving up the ghost. The next item on the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 28th of January of this year. Can they be agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. So now we move on to public participation. I have 3 people down to speak tonight. So Mr. Betho, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. My name is James Batho, and I'm campaigning for safer travel in Winchester. I have recently started the Winchester and District Speedwatch group, and I am involved with the campaign to reduce speeds and provide a safe crossing on the Andover Road. The City of Winchester Movement Strategy was published in 2019, and in the introduction to Priority 2, Support Healthier Lifestyle Choices, the following is stated. Across Winchester, pedestrians and cyclists compete for limited space with cars, buses and delivery vehicles. Many feel that it is unsafe to travel by bike or on foot. In my discussions with Winchester residents, the reason that walkers and cyclists feel unsafe is due to 2 factors, the volume of traffic and the speed of vehicles. The Movement Strategy Action Plan will reduce the volume of traffic and measures will impact the speed of vehicles. However, lockdown and the associated reduction in vehicle movements has provided us with the cautionary insight. The AA states, it's worrying that more drivers broke the speed limit when there was less traffic on Britain Street during lockdown. Also of great concern was the increase on 30-mile-an-hour roads, given there are more pedestrians and cyclists exercising. My vision for Winchester is bold and prioritises safe travel. I'm calling for the adoption of a default 20-mile-an-hour speed limit within the town boundaries, with exceptions being made for roads that are designated radial or connecting routes, which would be limited 30 mile an hour. Along with the action plan to reallocate road space for walking and cycling, this will provide a clear statement of intent to all who want safer travel in Winchester. The DFT identifies 2 different means of implementing 20-mile-an-hour schemes, 20-mile zones with calming measures and 20-mile-an-hour speed limits without traffic calming measures. In conjunction with the Hampshire County Council pilot programme, Winchester implemented a 20-mile zone in Stanmore, while Winchester City Council funded further zones in Highcliffe and Winnell. The HCC review of that pilot has effectively blocked a further rollout of 20-mile-an-hour zones in Hampshire, despite their own survey showing 54% of residents were in favour of the scheme prior to its introduction, and 50% of those who were indifferent before reported a change in their opinion and supporting the scheme, and made no assessment of the potential for an area-wide scheme. An alternative approach using 20-mile-an-hour speed limits has been taken by major cities in the south. Portsmouth City Council implemented an extensive area 20-mile-an-hour speed limit scheme, which applied to a large number of roads covering 94% of the road network. A further 20-mile-an-hour speed limit implementation in Bristol was completed in September 2015, and the study published by the University of West England showed that it was found that 94% of surveyed roads had slower speeds, active travel levels had increased, and there was a significant reduction in the number of fatal, serious and slight injuries, and commensurate significant financial savings for the NHS, far in excess of the implementation costs. In 2020, the UK government signed the Stockholm Declaration, which calls on authorities to mandate a maximum road travel speed of 20 mile an hour in areas where vulnerable road users and vehicles mix. A national default speed limit of 20 miles an hour will be introduced across the whole of Wales in 2023. Pilot locations have started this month. Councils and countries are recognising the benefits of the default 20 mile an hour speed limit, not only in reducing deaths, but also from improved public health through reduced noise pollution and by encouraging greater use by pedestrians and cyclists. There are cost benefits to the health system from increased public exercise and reduced admissions to A&E. Change will happen, but it needs action. I'm looking to engage and work with the Town Forum to get momentum for change. Does the Town Forum agree that a default speed limit of 20 miles an hour would help to improve the lives of the public? And does it support the call for its adoption to provide safer travel in Winchester? Thank you.
Does anyone want to respond to that? Councillor Todd, in particular, I'm looking, given your interest in the movement strategy.
No, I think this is very helpful. I mean, I think we still need to keep ahead with the interventions that are being put on street to support walking and cycling. I think an area-based 20 mile an hour zone would be a helpful supplement to that, and it's noticeable that the County Council's new active travel policy that's a bit in development at the moment does talk about 20 mile an hour zones having a role within planning for the future. So I mean, I've been a long fan of these. I've been disappointed that we've done it piecemeal, so that we've never really had a chance to see what happens if you in Hampshire, to see what happens if we do it on a citywide basis. I think it's less effective if people are kind of coming in and out of areas, you know, and sometimes it's 20 and sometimes it's 30. I think if we were just clear that we were changing the norm within the city, particularly in residential areas, then I think that could be really powerful. So I think this would be a really useful supplement to everything else that's going on. Yeah, I personally support it. My views haven't changed. I still think that, you know, 20 miles an hour for our residential areas would be a really good improvement.
Councillor Mather, I think you had your hand up first.
Yes, I mean, I have never had anything against 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and have been actually an advocate for them. And there are some parts of my ward which, especially the areas around schools, that would very much like to see themselves in a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I question the widespread popular support for them, because I remember that, you know, one of the issues we had with the rollout, and I can remember sitting down and being shown a map of responses, sort of yes and no in little dots all over it. It was very marginal whether we had the mandate, whether we had enough responses, and whether we had the mandate. So I think that, you know, and then subsequently when we put in these 20-mile-an-hour zones, I got a lot of feedback and correspondence from people who did not like them at all, and said they were pointless and they weren't going to be enforced. So I mean, I came to Winchester from central London, where the average speed was 11 miles an hour in 2000. So, you know, they kind of almost made sense to me in urban areas, but there's no means a kind of universal support for them. It's very divided. So thanks for your presentation anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Weir.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to endorse both what Mr. Batho has said and Councillor Todd's comments. I think it was interesting that at the Kings Barton Forum last night, you know, residents were very much behind the 20 miles an hour zoning that they have there on the ancillary roads, and have been working together to put up design signs to reinforce that, particularly for people coming in from outside the area, to say this is how you behave when you come into our residential streets. And I think building that consistency so that residents across Winchester understand that this is the norm is really important. And I think that if we can get some momentum behind a transition to a 20-mile-an-hour culture across Winchester, it would be to the benefit of everybody. Thank you.
Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you. I too.
Councillor Mather, your camera is still on. I'm not sure if you want to turn that off.
Sorry. I too welcome this very much, and thank you very much for your really good presentation. I would like to just sort of remind members of the Town Forum that the Town Forum agreed the Winchester Walking Strategy back in 2014, which was then endorsed by the Council, which recommended 20 mph. So we already have this, but it hasn't been implemented. So I think anything that could be done to add force is really to be welcomed. And thank you very much indeed for your contribution. But just like to add to comments that have been made previously, and having had quite a lot of experience with 20 mph in other places, it really does need to be backed up by physical measures to make sure that it's self-enforcing.
And where places have really adopted it well and it has become the norm, it is astonishing the difference that it makes to people's perceptions of safety and comfort on the streets when walking and cycling. They're hugely important. So thank you for the work you're doing, and let's hope that together we can move this forward as soon as possible. It is very much in budget, in policy, but we've got to make sure it actually happens in Winchester. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hiscock.
Thank you, Chair. There's not very much left to add, except I decided to add something as part of my role as Chair of the Walking Strategy Group, that where 30-mile-an-hour limits have been lowered, walking increases, and I think it's important that that's recognised. And I think it's also important that we recognise that it does need some engineering as well to make sure it's enforced. You can't enforce it by police; it has to be enforced just by design, really, which is more expensive, but it's still worth doing in the end. It doesn't all have to happen at once. It's 20 miles an hour is a mindset. There's no reason for 30 miles an hour. It was just a figure plucked at random. It's just what's become accepted. And I would like very much for the 20 miles an hour to be accepted in the same way that 30 has been for so long, and I think erroneously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kresk, I think you're the lucky last on this item.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think just to comment on the appetite for 20 miles an hour, I've not seen a chart which shows appetite. I'd like to see one, I think. In St Barnabas, I think you get a lot of, yes, please, 20 miles an hour is what we want. It's probably the most, or probably second most common subject that I get contacted about. So in St Barnabas, the Week area, we've got a good number of schools and a good number of children on the roads to those schools. So I think it's critical in the St Barnabas area to have that 20 mile an hour limit. And it's something that I've been asking for a long time. The response I get back is very much about it's highways, it's Hampshire County Council. So I kind of wonder what we can do more in the town forum to support this initiative. I'd like to do more, but other than talking about it and raising it to Hampshire County Council, I think it really does lie with Hampshire County Council in conjunction perhaps with the movement strategy. So maybe it's for other members on the forum to give guidance, but I think it's very much about Hampshire County Council, to my understanding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Betho, for your presentation. From my point of view, I completely agree. I'm absolutely supportive of 20 mile an hour limits around urban areas. I cannot see a justification for 30, but as others have said, this is the responsibility of Hampshire County Council, and we will continue to lobby for this. As Councillor Hutchison has said, this is already our adopted policy, so we can continue to push for this, especially through the movement strategy. But thank you very much for coming along today. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for the help of the Town Council. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, next on the list, Ms. Beck, are you here this evening? There you are.
Yes.
Hello, good evening.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up on an issue that was due to come to November's Town Forum meeting but didn't, and which is no longer in the work programme, namely the Play Area Improvement Plan. When discussing open space protection in the town last summer, I mentioned the importance of play facilities for older children, teens and adults, as well as playgrounds for smaller children. As you know, multi-use games areas, or muggers, are a key facility used by all ages, and which typically take the form of a hybrid basketball and football court, sometimes incorporating fixed cricket stumps or a tennis hitting screen into mesh fencing around the court. The best local examples are the full court at Eversley Park in Kingsworthy, and the half court plus tennis court in Oliver's Battery, though neither of these are in the town area. Within the town, mugger provision has been limited for many years, Muggers at North Walls and Westman Road were removed to make way for a skate park and housing respectively. The mugger near the Carroll Centre was also removed to create a skate park, although it was later replaced elsewhere in Stanmore. There are no muggers in the northern half of the town. It would be very helpful if the forum incorporated muggers into its play area improvement plan. Perhaps you've already done so, in which case it would be great to hear about this. We've identified 3 investments that might be made using the forum's play budget and SIL monies, which we think would make a huge difference. These are refreshing the mugger in Highcliffe as part of the KGB Park plan. Currently, the plan includes replacement of fencing around the mugger, but the court would benefit from repainting with up-to-date markings for basketball in particular. Replacing the mugger at River Park as part of the North Walls Park plan. There's space to do this as the play area is upgraded, we think. Adding a half or full court mugger at either Dean Lane Park or St Matthew's Field in Week. If these 3 investments were made alongside creation of a mugger at Kings Barton, which is outside the town, and accounting for existing muggers in Stanmore and Oliver's Battery, we believe all city residents would have a mugger within 15 to 20 minutes walk of their home, consistent with your 15-minute city vision. On a linked topic, we'd be grateful for the forum's attention to the sports ecosystem in the city, in light of the way the new centre at Bar End is being operated. We appreciate the operating model and contract were inherited by the Liberal Democrat administration, but we're all having to make the best of it. And we heard at the Winchester Sport and Leisure Park Open Forum yesterday that the centre operator plans to triple the size of their own swimming lesson programme, rather than allowing local swim schools to hire the facilities at Bar End. Those swim schools, which are small enterprises or a local charity in the case of Winchester City Penguins, will need your support as city councillors to ensure they survive and thrive in such a scenario. Other community providers of sport and fitness activities, as well as small gyms, may also need support. It's important that people continue to have access to a range of high quality local providers offering varied activities and styles of instruction, so the town is truly a place where everyone can play and learn vital life skills such as swimming. Thank you very much.
Very much. Not sure if anyone is able to respond on the play paper, why that was taken out of the programme.
I can certainly take it away, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And come back to Emma with a written response might be best.
Yeah.
I do remember it being in the programme. I remember Emma talking about it at the meeting
previously.
November, yeah. So, but yeah, I couldn't say definitively why it's come out of the plan.
Yeah, Chair, the key reason it came out of the plan in November was that there wasn't a recommendation that was required in November. What we can say is that we can bring it back early in the new cycle.
Yeah.
It is important. It is a plan that you need to approve, and there will certainly be some proposals that will need to be considered in the June-July cycle of the meetings.
Great. No, thank you. Mrs. Beck, did you hear that response?
I did, thank you. That's great to know. So will that include muggers now, as well as playgrounds for smaller children?
I can't comment on whether they're included at the moment. What I can ask is that there be specific discussion in that report around that issue, isn't it?
Yeah, because I know it is something that I have raised with the officers as well, that the need for the provision of play areas for older children. So it is something that we will continue to ask about. In respect of the swim school, I'm not sure if anyone here is able to respond on that. I know Councillor Prince is probably the best placed person to respond to that, but as he's not a member of the Town Forum, he isn't here tonight. So again, that may be something that we are able to provide you with a written response on, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. I think we just wanted to flag the issue in general, really, to ensure that people were aware of the sort of change in the ecosystem and what that might do to local businesses.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Did anyone? Oh, Councillor Scott, sorry, I've just seen the chat. Did you want to raise a question?
Well, just a comment, please, if I can. Thanks to Emma, because over a number of years, Emma has really championed sport facilities in the Winchester district, really, and really sort of concur with her comments. Having sort of facilities such as a mugger in an area such as Stanmore and a skate park does really provide excellent provision for young people, and obviously it goes hand in hand, because normally when people think about play areas, they just sometimes automatically think about 0 to 12-year-olds, which is as important as well. But actually getting the balance between 0 to 12 and something for teenagers and older children is key. And sometimes, okay, it all comes down to budgets and making sure, as Emma's raised today, that it's on the programme, and the programme does come through, such as the Town Forum, and take confidence that Mr. Botham will look into that and bring it back on. But I do think going around the district, actually, with the likes of Councillor Hiscott, Councillor Berry, and a few probably others, I can't remember now, we looked at some good facilities around other council areas and tried to sort of think of what we could enhance and bring back into Winchester. And Councillor Hiscott chaired a small panel of us members on the Town Forum to look at how we can enhance our open spaces. It was an excellent panel, and such as things like the Margaret and skate parks were upgraded. The North Walls skate park, again, is a fantastic facilities for young people. Never a day when you go through past the leisure centre, you'll see an absolute crowd of young people enjoying the skate park. So I'd like to thank Emma for always coming to our meetings and really sort of challenging us on sports facilities. And let's hope we can actually enhance all open spaces, because it's clearly when you have those facilities in your communities, it does provide great provision for especially young people. Thanks.
Very much. Great. No, thank you, Mrs. Beck. As always, as Councillor Scott has said, you always do bring very thoughtful contributions. So thank you, and we will respond to you on those points that you've raised.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And Councillor Bell, I think you are the last person for public participation. Are you here this evening?
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Thank you. I'll put my camera on if that's okay. What I want to present is on North Walls, River Park North Walls. I believe there may be something later on in the agenda. If you want me to wait until that, I will. But if not, I'll say what I want to say now. Is that your preference?
Say what you want to say now. Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to say, I had expected that maybe there might have been a presentation. I think there was a report that might have been coming about the North Walls development from the work that's been going on, and I was hoping that might be come to this evening, and therefore that's why I asked to speak. I understand that's now going to be later, and after Purdah it's going to have to be June. But however, what I wanted to say was that there's a lot of interest and a lot of, well, more than interest, if you like, about the North Walls and the River Park area. Let's leave aside the building for the moment, but what else is there in terms of provision? What is there in terms of provision? We've heard from the meeting yesterday that the tennis courts and so on and five-a-side will remain open for the moment. That's fine. But what could we do in the future with this area? And there is a lot of interest around areas such as open water swimming, possibly a Lido, possibly a tent-only campsite, possibly, you know, all sorts of, even a youth hostel, all sorts of provision that need a lot of further development and discussion beyond simply closing down a building and cutting the grass. We need to have some kind of input into a plan going forward about the wider use of North Walls River Park, and not just for the people who live within the city centre. I live outside. I have just as much interest in what happens in North Walls River Park as the people who live inside. So it's just really to flag that up. If there's something coming forward as a report, we'd love to see it. We don't have that report as it is at the moment, but just to say that there is a huge amount of interest in this area and what might be coming forward. We don't know what it is at the moment, but we know that there are so many opportunities here that we need to be able to interact with. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I'm not sure, Mr. Botham, if you wanted to respond on the plans coming forward.
The original intention was for a report to come, I think, to this cycle. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to bring forward quite a very significant consultation process that is planned for exactly the issues that Councillor Bell is raising. That will now take place immediately after the elections. So we haven't been able to complete it before Purdah, so it will commence then, and that will inform the report that comes back to Town Forum that will discuss a whole range of options for the future use of facilities of the North Walls Park.
And that consultation will be open to everyone in the district. It won't be limited to the town.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you will have your opportunity to contribute to that process.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments in relation to Councillor Bell's statements? Oh, Councillor Scott. Can I just remind people to please put it in the chat? Otherwise, it's quite difficult to keep track of whose hand is up and who, if it's an old hand or a new hand. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, so I just did the way.
No, that's all right.
Because I thought by the time I type out something, I think you might have moved on. So I'm not the fastest typer in the world. So I thought I'd give you a quick wave. Councillor Bell raises again another key point, and I think one of the key points I would concur with Councillor Bell is facilities coming forward, like what we do on North Walls, whatever, has to enhance what the general view is in the Winchester district, because we sometimes forget we're a Winchester District Council, and even though obviously the building's in the Hyde stroke sort of central Winchester area, we do have to sometimes take in consideration of other factors, exactly what Councillor Bell said. So I really do concur with her comments on this matter. I do think, though, we really do need to make sure we do put our thinking caps on and actually make sure, because obviously we've got a great facility down being just nearly finishing off in Bar End, but I do think we need to do justice to what we can provide and what moving forward what can go into North Walls, which will be a tick in the City Council box. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. There are no other further comments on that. I'd like to thank Councillor Bell for her contribution, and we will move on to the next agenda item, which is a full agenda of presentations tonight. It's a presentation from the Hampshire Cultural Trust. Mr. Sapwell, I think, is here tonight to present. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you see me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Like I'm in the dark, actually, don't I? Apologies to councillors who've seen much of the presentation before. I'm just conscious that I've spoken a number of times at different meetings in the last few months, so perhaps members may have seen a number of the pieces that I'm going to share beforehand. Apologies if that's the case. Just in terms of clarifying how long I've got, I think it's half an hour, isn't it, Chair?
I think we did say 15, 20 minutes.
15 to 20 minutes and then questions afterwards.
Fine, that's good. Okay, let me share my screen. And just be helpful to confirm that you can see the screen.
Yes, we can. We can.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll just go through some of the slides that you'll have seen before is an overview of the background of Hampshire Cultural Trust, but perhaps the piece that would be more useful to discuss would be what we're looking at doing this year and our plans for Winchester. So I'll just whiz through the early slides, but for info for those who haven't seen them before, just go through where we are today as an organisation and highlights from the previous year. Bit about our response to COVID and where we're going this year. So for those who aren't fully familiar with us, Hampshire Cultural Trust was set up in 2014 as a partnership between the county and the city, where we were spun out, if you like, into an independent charitable trust for museums and arts services from both the county and the city. We're the largest cultural charitable trust of our kind in the country, operating 23 venues overall. So it was a significant undertaking from both the local authorities, and I hope you'll agree it's been incredibly successful and recognised as such nationally, actually. At the heart of our organisation now is what we call our strategic core, where we see ourselves as three equally important elements that have contributed to our success and our mission. Primarily, of course, and at the top is that we're a cultural organisation running arts and museums, but equally we are a profit generating trading company, and we look to generate through the trading company attached to the charity substantial commercial income to sustain the organisation, as well as crucially having a valuable social impact on the communities and the towns that we serve. And as such, we see ourselves equally as a charity and take that very seriously in our work. We run 23 venues across the county, 4 of those in Winchester, which I'll come on to in a moment. And in terms of cultural trust, as I said, we're fairly unique in the sense that we also run art centres and performance spaces and galleries as well as museums. Most of the other cultural trusts in England tend to be either museums or individual art centres. So the scope of our work is extremely wide. Within Winchester, we run Winchester City Museum in the top right there, as well as the 2 galleries in the Discovery Centre, which I'll come on to later on, and of course the Westgate Museum at the top of the High Street. To give you an idea of how many visitors each of these got in 2019-20, which despite closing 2.5 weeks earlier than we wanted due to the first lockdown, incredibly a year ago now, was still one of our busiest years ever. So just under 40,000 visitors at the City Museum, 25,000 at the City Space Gallery, and just under 50,000 at the primary art gallery for Winchester and Discovery Centre, and 25,000 at the Westgate. To give you some idea, the Great Hall has just under 100,000 visitors, and Winchester Cathedral, in terms of paying visitors, has just over 100,000 visitors. So we are a considerable part of the visitor economy when all of this is put together. Since 2014, we've run 250 temporary exhibitions. We've also put on more than 400 shows, classes and workshops across our venues, predominantly our art centres. In Winchester, many of you will remember some of these significant exhibitions that we've done since we started. Gerald Scarfe a couple of years ago, the Jane Austen celebrations, Jane Austen 200, which we led the campaign, contributed 21 million to Hampshire economy, as well as Turner and the Sun, and of course our I Do wedding dresses from our own collections that we put on a few years ago to coincide with the royal weddings. In terms of investment in Winchester, we've also as an organisation invested a considerable amount of cash within the Winchester City Museum, 56,000 in 2016-17 on the ground floor, and followed by 75,000 at the end of 2018-19, beginning of the financial year 2019 on the first floor, as well as this in-kind contribution. So we've invested in 2 gallery floors at the museum. We look after Winchester City Council's collections, and we manage access to those collections for a variety of different people and groups who need to access city's collections and the county collections, as you can see there. Critically, since 2014 as a charity, we've raised, this was at the beginning of March, over £6 million as a charity over those 6 going on 7 years. This is when you take into account all of the gift aid that we've collected as a charity, donations in sites, as well as a number of programs, restricted programs that we've put together for social impact initiatives, as well as just over £750,000 since lockdown, March 2020, of government funding for this year, which I'll come on to in a moment. We've got a considerable range of funders across the city and the county and nationally that you can see many of them there who've been critical to this fundraising success. We have a few years ago refined our 4 strategic goals as an organisation, which take us forward. The first of which is about providing high quality programmes and venues that inspire diverse audiences, local pride. The second, critically, to improve the well-being, health and happiness through cultural experiences, no more important than it is today going forward. And we see ourselves as central to how we communities recover across the county and of course in the city. Goal 3, delivering sustainability, both in terms of financial for the local economy and building stronger, resilient communities. And Goal 4, creating fulfilling employment and volunteering opportunities. We have about 150 staff working for the organisation across the county, as well as nearly 500 volunteers. So we're a considerable contributor in terms of work and volunteering. So I'll just buzz through these 2019. It seems so long ago now. The big exhibition in the summer, of course, across 3 venues. The Great Hall, we took this Vatican endorsed replica of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, as well as taking the BP Portrait Award for the first time to Winchester. And actually the most popular of them was Orla Kiley's Life in Pattern at the gallery, with over 17,000 visitors to that exhibition. Elsewhere in the county, we put on a number of different quirky exhibitions. Lucian Day there in Basingstoke and Gosport. I grew up 80s in the same. And at Milestones, our biggest venue in Basingstoke, we had a commemoration of the outbreak of World War II. The year saw considerable investment for us. Milestones Museum is by far our busiest venue, having just under 110,000. We'd like to get that to more like 150,000 visitors a year. The county's living history museum, and we invested there £210,000 of our own money in the development of the top floor there, cafe, retail, and that experience. Sadly, we completed that in February 2020, so we only had it open a month before we had to close it. But it came into its own later in the year. We also, as I said, at Winchester City Museum, invested in the second floor there, 112,000, some familiar faces there at the opening. And at Aldershot Military Museum, we made a significant investment in a World War II inspired assault course, which was due to open last April, but actually we opened it in the summer. We've been 2 years the finalist of Best Museum Visit in the National School Travel Awards. Quite prestigious awards, actually. I used to work, as mentioned, at the Youth Hostel earlier. I used to be head of commercial and national operations for the Youth Hostel Association before joining the trust. And this was a considerable it's a considerable accolade to get into the School Travel Awards. It was obviously big for YHA in terms of accommodation, and we were up against the V&A, the Science Museum, Natural History Museum, to name just a few. So 2 years in a row we've been finalists there. In terms of our social impact, these are a number of the programmes that we've been running in 2019-20. Combat Stress, working with veterans' mental health in Aldershot. On the Move with Silent Mind, working with people here in Winchester at our Chilcombe, which is our main office and collection centre, working with men actually who've come out of referrals with Silent Mind to work on our historic vehicle collections there. We've had to take a lot of that online actually this year, which was still provided contact for the gentlemen who are involved in that project over lockdown. Here also in Winchester, we've worked before lockdown in a considerable intervention project in Winchester Prison, working with prisoners to explore a number of issues for them and work towards their rehabilitation. And that programme we're looking to continue as soon as we can actually get back into prison. Not many people want to do that, but we would like to once that's allowed after lockdown's lifted. And Horizon 2020, on the left there, a 5-year programme founded by the Paul Hamlin Foundation, working with every education centre, that's pupil referral unit in Hampshire. We're the only cultural organisation to work with everyone in a county. So where have we got to financially? 2019-20 was our best year financially ever, turnover just under 7 million, and for the first time our fundraised and earned income together contributed more to the trust than that came from the local authorities. So we were 51% self-funded in that year. As you can see there's the split of the predominant contribution coming from the county, the city council being second biggest funder, and a number of other local authorities contributing to their local venues. In terms of visitor numbers in 2019-20, just to show you where we ended, 450, I'm not sure if you can actually see my cursor, but 453,000 visitors across the county in that year. It's considerable growth, 2.7% growth on the previous year. We estimate actually with the run rate we were working on at the time that we lost about 15,000 visitors when we closed on the 18th of March. So had that been the case, it would have been our best year ever. You can see there that the Westgate pretty much in line with the previous year, Winchester City Museum pretty stable, and Sistine Chapel, a number of those high profile exhibitions showing good growth at the Discovery Centre. In terms of, the slide's not moving as quickly as I'd like it to. In terms of earned income then, just to show how we've developed over the years, 15-16 was our first year of audited accounts. At that point, our total earned income from our venues was just over 1.7 million and £3.71 per person visiting. Within that period of just 4 years, we've grown that income by 44%, predominantly actually in yield, in income per head, taking more money in terms of gift aid, donations and all these commercial areas, as well as a more proactive approach to pricing in our museums through promotion and particularly our digital investment. As I said, we're disappointed that the top figure of visitors went down, but had we actually been open for those last 2.5 weeks, we would have been ahead. And at the end of the year, we also invested considerably in our staff. We were able to introduce a whole new package of wellbeing measures for our staff and enhancement to benefits. So what happened when we closed? We closed our venues on the 24th of March, 105 events postponed, 71 cancelled, and we closed again in the other lockdowns. We have had a structured internal communication plan throughout. We work with a platform, a workplace social media platform, where we communicate with all of our employees and volunteers and have kept them up to date. We furloughed nearly half of our people, 160 employees and casual workers over that time. Within 10 days of closure, we launched a brand new online digital publication website called Culture on Call. We've now been running, at the beginning of the month, we've been running it for 47 weeks and have made 380 articles, from everything from looking at our collections to putting exhibitions that we would have been delivering in the year online, where we could get into our venues and film them, as well as quizzes, information for children who've been homeschooling, and actually as well later in the year selling some of the watercolours from the Sunday Times watercolour competition, which was due to go to the Willis in Basingstoke. There has been wide sector recognition of Culture on Call. We were asked to present at the Virtual Museums and Heritage Show nationally in the autumn on the success of this publication, able to celebrate VE Day, VJ Day that year, and you can see there how you would go and approach it. If you haven't had a look, then the best way to get into it is to go and have a look at it, and we'd welcome feedback and contribution, of course. We also took a number of our exhibitions online and developed an e-commerce platform later, as I said, in the autumn, not straight away. And here we sold a number of these watercolours, as well as taking a number of the classes and workshops that we would have been delivering in our art centres online, so people could, rather than cancel those and give their money back, could involve themselves in an online version, and we could continue to employ the artists who would have been delivering those classes. We also invested in live streaming equipment and actually took our annual festival that we do up at the West End Centre in Aldershot online with a number of bands streamed from the venue, and here we had the Hampshire poet working with us on live poetry. Had fairly good press coverage over the period, based a lot on South Today Early. That feature was on Culture on Call, and we had a large amount of press coverage actually on reopening, because we reopened as quickly as we possibly could. Here on the left is a piece from our exhibition in the autumn here in Winchester in the National Press, and a number of other good press there. As I said, we started planning to reopen at the earliest opportunity immediately after closure, and because we'd invested in our ticketing and booking digital systems back when we first started, which was a lot behind our commercial income, we were able to just sort of lift those into our non-fee paying venues, so we could book slots and book online in quite a straightforward manner. We designed 150 individual bespoke safety signs and risk assessments in order to keep a bit of fun, as you can see here, within these important regulations, and we got all of our risk assessments completed and published online before reopening in July. We also accelerated a rollout of contactless donation units across the portfolio, which was ready for opening as well. The leadership team of HCT, myself and marketing and our HR team visited all of the venues before opening to check on the measures and to meet the staff and ensure they were comfortable with what we were doing in terms of reopening. And we've had a really good response from our staff in terms of getting our venues open. There you can see our lead, who some of you may know, Katerina, at the Westgate there in Winchester before the summer. We also put in place a campaign focused, it must be said, on our outside venues, understandably, really trying to get some momentum behind the assault course that we put in at Aldershot Military Museum and hadn't been able to open as it was outside, and at Milestones, where we obviously needed the income from our biggest admission paying venue. We also invested in a number of outside activities. Here's some outdoor cinema at Basing House, and actually a socially distanced Meet Santa before we closed down in December there. In Winchester, you'll be aware that we had plans to introduce charging to our museum starting that year. We continued on that, so we invested in the digital equipment and the point of sale and everything necessary to implement that modest charging across the Westgate and City Museum. And I'll show you the visitor figures in a minute. It's incredibly encouraging, the effect of this in terms of the charging being a barrier. It's certainly, both anecdotally in the figures, has not proved to be that. Within the flagship galleries, we returned where we left off. We also went out with a national survey to all of our staff and volunteers in July and August. Many of you will know or have heard of the Sunday Times top 100 lists of organisations to work for. We went with the company that provide those lists and took a pulse survey that would give us an indicative placing, and we're quite bowled over to find that our staff would have placed us as the 54th best not-for-profit organisation to work for in the country had we actually taken part in the main survey. You won't be surprised to hear that we will be taking part in the main survey this year, but it was we really felt was very encouraging for us, given that we were in the middle of this pandemic at the time. Where are we finishing this year? Where will we finish in March? Here's the visitor figures. You can see that actually over the course of the year, just under 15% of the numbers that we would have had in the previous year, which of course devastating. The slide which looks so good in terms of our earned income in 1920, you can see that instead of 2.5 million, we've made just under £600,000 of earned income in 2021. But importantly, and I think a lot in the sector have seen this, but we've certainly seen the effects of the investment at Milestones and Aldershot. The actual spend per head across our visitors increased considerably in 2021. There's no doubt the staycation effect in the summer had an effect on that spend per head, with people who would have been on holiday being more willing to spend in the venues. So that was a considerable increase. So actually 77% down in income, although we were 85% down in visitors. And here, just to touch on, unsurprisingly, Basin House, our outside venue, actually delivering nearly 86% what it did in the previous year. Aldershot delivering 40%, despite being locked for 2/3 of the year. Actually, while it was open, it performed better than previously, and a really commendable performance there at Milestones. But actually, in terms of the average percentages, you can see that Winchester City Museum actually had 13% of visitors, which was pretty typical for all of the venues generally, and these are free venues predominantly that surround it there. So we didn't see the double effect of the pandemic and the charging reducing those numbers as we might have expected. But disappointingly, we had of course a capacity restriction on the West Gate, where we had to severely limit how many people could go into that small space. So understandably that was down. But the much more limited opening hours at the Winchester Discovery Centre had a huge effect on our galleries there. And obviously there's some news that I'll come on to in a minute regarding the future there, where we hope to address this in any future circumstances. So looking ahead, our priorities going into 21-22, obviously reopening, rebuilding our visitors, and we're reopening a new attraction we've been investing at Milestones. I'll show you a little bit of that in a moment. Gosport Museum and Gallery, I'll just show you some of that as well as a major investment for us. And you may or may not have heard, as the papers have just went live last week, that there is a decision going to the Hampshire executive member on Winchester Discovery Centre this Friday, with a proposal that Hampshire Cultural Trust takes over the operation of Winchester Discovery Centre, hopefully all things being equal, as early as spring 2022. There's a number of elements that I'm happy to talk about in terms of what's in the proposal at the moment, but extending the opening hours and making it a much more culturally led venue as opposed to a library with some galleries is our vision for it. As well as all of the things that we have a strong track record in delivering as an organisation in terms of commercial income, donations, exciting cultural programme, performance, etc. So we're incredibly excited about this opportunity, and there is to be confirmed a joint investment from both the county and ourselves in some capital works to refresh and rejuvenate that venue prior to that opening, also in the plan. We're also working on a new immersive exhibition stroke experience in Winchester that we will hope to be opening in spring 22, working with some really exciting partners who I have an NDA with at the moment, so a non-disclosure agreement, so unfortunately I can't talk about, but suffice to say it's an incredibly exciting exhibition that we're planning if we can get it over the line in the next couple of months. We're also looking at investing in a new membership and individual giving programme this year, as well as updating our IT and digital infrastructure. And we're at the end of the year, we will be applying to the Arts Council for the NPO, National Portfolio Organisation status. We're the only cultural trust spun out from a local authority that doesn't have NPO status in England, and we're the biggest. We need to put that right. And we've had some very positive conversations with Arts Council for that. And as I said, we want to build on our people engagement strategy and take part in the Times Top 100 survey. We're predicting this year a modest numbers of visitors to come back, conservative, should I say, of 51% of our previous budgeted trading rather, getting up to 100% by March, we hope, but starting at the end of June with at the beginning of June rather with 30%, and budgeting on about half going through the summer and gradually building through the rest of the year. We're anticipating opening most venues from the 28th of May, but the Winchester venue is actually opening as soon as we can on the 17th of May, when the government lifts the restrictions, assuming that we stay on track, because the Discovery Centre as a library will already be open. The Gosport project, I'll just tell you a bit about this because there's some things which I just feel are really important for us to consider in Winchester. The Gosport Museum and Art Gallery is a project that we've got funding from the High Streets Heritage Action Zone one of the few, only 4 actually in the south of England, to have that funding, and is a capital project in our venue there in the old grammar school in Gosport. It involves a complete refurbishment, a new cafe bar, a new museum. It doesn't currently have a museum, a refresh of the gallery space, as well as a new interior courtyard and better access to the high street. So a really exciting project, but I think why I'd like to share it is just the power of levering in funding when everybody's lined up. This project, we had committed funding at the beginning of it. Hampshire County Council committed funding, Gosport Borough Council committed funding, and through that we were able to secure funding from Historic England and direct from DCMS, as well as the Friends of the Museum and some donors. And we were actually approached, rather than us approaching, by Arts Council to say, who we talk to regularly, to look at options for additional funding from them. And we've just had our expression of interest for this 100,000 confirmed, so we're going to a full application for that. So it's a £1.5 million investment project, and a huge testament to the partnership that we have in that town with multiple stakeholders. As I touched on at Milestones, we've invested in a new attraction in terms of a pier and a teddy bear museum, which comes from a legacy. We're going to put in a full history of piers there from the Victorian times up to here, the 1980s, with some machines that certainly I remember playing on that pier, and we're hoping to open that in the summer. In terms of exhibitions, we will open in the spring here in Winchester with the first retrospective on Raymond Briggs in the country at the Discovery Centre, followed by this quirky Winchester-born photographer who went on to make his career photographing pretty much everyone in Hollywood royalty. Fascinating guy, and we're bringing that to not on the dates that you can see there because that's been postponed obviously, but in the summer, followed by the British Museum Tour and Exhibition in August, and Eric Ravilius next spring. So some really exciting stuff coming up in the Discovery Centre. And in terms of Winchester, as I said, I think the priorities for us are really hotting up in the city at the moment. The Discovery Centre is an incredibly exciting proposal, and we see that as being a really important cultural hub and a statement of intent really for Winchester, with the wider funders MPO later in the year regarding that. As I said, we're working on this immersive experience for spring 2022, and continuing to look at ways that we can collaborate with all of the cultural attractions across the city, and working with what members will be familiar here is our aspiration for a future museum attraction. There's some information here on the immersive experience and what we're looking to try and achieve in terms of it will be based on Anglo-Saxon heritage, and we're talking to the city at the moment about potentially looking at some different areas that we could locate that. But the big thing for us is the big strategic piece for us in Winchester, as I said actually at the cabinet meeting last week, is that we, in terms of a visitor city, we punch so far below our weight in terms of the number of visitors that we get to the city. The visitor numbers actually to the cathedral of comparable sizes are disappointing, and the number of overnight stays and people coming to the city is disappointing. And we believe we really need to work on the city's USPs and put ourselves on the national map with some of the national story that we have to tell here in Winchester. So our aspiration, as I said before, is for this Winchester's Jorvik for the digital age, an immersive, inclusive, exciting attraction that will punch us into the national picture. We believe that this should be much more than just a museum attraction. It must have the academic rigour and the importance in the way that Jorvik does, but it's got to be inclusive, it's got to be family friendly, it's got to embrace the wider creative and arts sector and anchor the city, which is a museum in itself, of course, in a museum attraction. I think that's where I'll finish here. I think the other thing that I wanted to say, sorry, I'll just stop presenting for a moment before I ask questions. I think the screen's disappeared. Has it now, Chair? You can see me?
Yep, we can see you again.
I think that, I suppose that what I would say as the Chief Executive of Hampshire Cultural Trust, and hearing a member talk about the Youth Hostel Association was interesting, and for me it's a call really to Winchester and us as a tourist city that I'm really passionate about since joining here. When I was at YHA, we made capital investments in Canterbury, Stratford, York, Bristol, a number of key cities, serious investments in new youth hostels there. We closed our youth hostel in Winchester because we couldn't make it commercially viable and there wasn't that future. And I think that that's a really disappointing place to be in terms of where we are today. And I would just urge all of us to really pull together and to be ambitious and in terms of the tourist economy and the reasons to visit. And that's why we're so passionate actually about a new cultural attraction and things that will really make a difference and see us as the cathedral city that we deserve to be in the future. So I just thought I'd add that at the end, rightly or wrongly, and then invite questions.
Lovely, thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sapwell? No, so we'll say thank you very much. As I said, oh, sorry, Councillor Weir.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
That's all right.
I would say I wanted to thank Paul again for his presentation. I think it is inspiring, and I think that point about focusing on what we can do to bring young people into the city is critical to this. That it's about something that really engages with that sort of mindset, and I think the work he's doing with the Play to the Crowd is really important in that respect as well, and that there's a fundamental theme there that still needs a lot of work on to understand how we build Winchester's presence in that very crowded field, but I think we're grateful for the engagement in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Todd, I think you're...
Yeah, no, I mean, this is all very energising and very exciting, and it's great to hear about a sort of optimistic and positive way forward, and I'm pleased also that we'll hopefully be looking at sensible opening hours for the Discovery Centre and other things coming out of all of this. I had a question, and you talked about the fact that you were aware of the other attractions in the city, and I just wondered how important for our success is the sort of collaboration between you all. I mean, do we need a kind of an integrated offer between you all, or should we rely on sort of red and tooth and claw competition between you all in order to drive us ahead? But I just wondered, how can we ensure that 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 as opposed to 3 or 2 in terms of looking at our offer as a place? I mean, what models you're aware of, or what would you like to see in order to make that happen?
I think definitely not red-blooded, red tooth, or however you phrased it, competition. No, I mean within the tourist space, collaboration is absolutely key, and we have certainly seen progress on that over the years. When you look at something like the Sistine Chapel, which we put in the Great Hall, as well as both galleries and the Discovery Centre, and the work we're now doing with the county and the Discovery Centre, that's really positive on that. I think working together with a shared vision, which a lot of the work that's been going on in visioning and the work that we've been looking at through that process is important, and having that shared kind of output to the world, if you like, of why you should come to Winchester, and definitely being more joined up in regards to that. But I think it's got to be more than simply sort of telling each other what we're doing. We need to have a combined effort. Now that could be through ticketing. We've been long wanting to develop joint ticketing with a number of the other attractions. Had a long conversation with new Chief Operating Officer at the Cathedral last week, which was really encouraging in terms of working with the Cathedral to see that more joined up approach with what is the major attraction in the city, though only marginally interesting to say in terms of paying visitors. But I think there needs to be a real reaching out in terms of, if we're talking about the youth market, which is so important, you know, that what sustains the YHA as the biggest youth accommodation provider in the country in Canterbury and York is the international youth market, with it's a huge amount of their travel. It comes from the continent in terms of groups that come to York, that go to the Cathedral, that then stay overnight in the youth hostel, teenage groups from across Europe, and in my last role I spent a long time selling packages to those groups in Germany and France, so I know what they're looking for. And at the moment we don't sell ourselves in a joined up way, in the way that those kind of groups would be looking for, and obviously we're short on accommodation, we know that, but I think that's important, and I have been working positively with the officers at the council, and Andrew Costello's just joined the council. I think we've got to do a lot with our online presence as well. It's fragmented, it doesn't journey, it's not slick. You don't hit the Cathedral, want to visit and go somewhere else. You know, there's a lot we can do there, and we're really keen to take a lead in doing that. That's where we've driven our numbers and our revenue, through a really good website, really good online conversion, really good promotion, and I think there's much that we can offer the city in a joined up approach to all of that. We're moving. I sounded sort of depressing saying we closed our youth hostel in Winchester. We're moving in the right direction, but we need to give ourselves a sort of kick forward, if you like. Hopefully that answers the question in a rambling kind of way.
Thank you. That was helpful. Very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison, you've got a comment.
Yes, very quickly, I just also want to really welcome, I think, what is a very interesting presentation, and particularly the approaches you're taking to collaboration and partnership. Really impressed by how you, through partnership funding, have managed to increase what you can put into all sorts of projects. And I think this is very much in tune with the work that the Town Forum was doing on its vision, which is much more collaborative. And I think that this is something that has a huge future, and I wish you well. Hope that it can go forward as speedily as possible. Just to mention, in terms of the youth and your comment about young people coming from Europe, of course there are huge numbers of young people who come to Winchester for the language schools. And there are all sorts of opportunities when you look collaboratively and try to work in a joined up way, where I think there's many organisations to really benefit. So all power to your elbow. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo their comments, really. That was absolutely inspirational, and I think we'll look forward to working together in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening.
Thanks. Bye. The next presentation we have is in relation to on-street electric vehicle charging with Mr. Wren and Mr. Riley from Hampshire County Council. Are you both here today?
Yes, we are. Both
Hello.
here. Yes, good.
Thank you very much for being here.
Well, good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors and officers. For those people that don't know me, I'm Andy Wren. I work for Hampshire County Council in the Economy, Transport and Environment Department. I'm responsible for pretty much everything that's electronic at the roadside, and that includes electric vehicle charge points. Many thanks for inviting us to come along to talk to the Winchester Town Forum this evening. My colleague Ben Riley and I are going to give you a brief presentation, shouldn't last too long, which sort of describes our trials here in Winchester. And after that, we're very happy to take any questions or comments or explain things afterwards. So I think the best thing to do is just kick off with a short presentation and then we'll take it from there. So Ben, I hope you're ready to share your screen.
Yeah, hopefully it all worked out. So I'll just turn my camera off for it because for some reason my laptop's not enjoying that this evening. Right, so here we go. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so as Andy said, my name is Ben Riley. I've been working with Andy in the Future Mobility team. I'm a graduate engineer from the University of Portsmouth, and it's been an exciting past year or so in Andy's team, which has culminated into the following pilot scheme. So apologies if anyone's seen similar information of this before, but for those that haven't, one of the biggest challenges which is associated with electric vehicles and is an actual barrier to their uptake is where to charge your vehicle if you don't have access to off-street parking. With the recent government announcement banning the sales of new petrol and diesel vehicles in 2030, the County Council is running 2 on-street pilot schemes in Winchester and Eastleigh to help aid in the authorities' learning and policy development in preparation for the expected influx in electric vehicles within Hampshire. As part of the scheme, 22 charge points will be placed within Hyde, Winchester. All are street lighting charge points where columns are located at the front of the footway to minimise having cables over the footway and to reduce trip hazards. There will be no designated electric vehicle bays for these charge points to prevent adding to existing parking pressures within these areas. And by installing at the majority of the street lighting columns within the area, it will increase the opportunity to charge your vehicle and the overall provision within the area. So our thinking is by having many charge points dotted about in the area of Hyde, you won't be too far away, but also it won't impact on the residents which rely on parking as close as they can to their own properties. So it's trying to find a balance between the two. The scheme itself was pilot funded from the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, also now known as OZEV, and their scheme of the on-street residential charge point scheme, otherwise known as the AUX. With the remaining 25% of the capital costs and maintenance covered by the County Council, and that has been funded by our Committee on Climate Change. The scheme has been delivered through our Central Southern Regional Framework, which is maintained and operated by Joju Limited, and the scheme will be in place for a minimum of 3 years. So the scheme itself, as you can see on the right, there's a location map. The location was selected based upon a socio-economic study that we conducted probably about a year ago now, right at the start of lockdown, and it identified the SO22 postcode as the most likely area within Winchester to own an EV. And it also coincided with the fact that the street lighting columns were placed at the front of the footway. This was a significant factor in our thinking, was that it reduces the amount of cost to the scheme. The biggest cost with charge points is the associated civil works for relocating street lighting columns or implementing additional street furniture. There were many other areas within Winchester which experienced the same issues of having no off-street parking available, but part of the reason why we focused on this area was because of the physical constraints of the area. Excuse me. There are streets which are too narrow for additional street furniture elsewhere, so by putting in a bollard, which is what our Eastleigh scheme is focused on, would prevent access for disabled users on the footway, but also people with prams or anything else like that. These other areas, though, I believe we've had a lot of correspondence from people within Fairfield Road and other areas, but they will be sort of our priority areas for future schemes subject to funding. Part of our thinking as well is that we're interested to see the difference between charge points which are based upon an app or subscription base for payment and also contactless. The contactless units are more expensive than the other ones, so we're trialling a smaller number of contactless units to try and look into how habits and how the charge points are used differently. So the charge point design itself looks like these on the images on the right hand side. The image which shows the green cover is actually from Reading City Council, and we've adapted one of their images to show what the charge point will look like with Joju's branding on it. And so the street lighting column itself, the power is drawn from the street lighting column, and the charge that is provided to vehicles is a slow charge, which is a 3.5 to 5.5 kilowatt, also known as a trickle charge. So sort of the purpose for this is that vehicles will be parked up overnight, typically for between 8 to 12 hours. And if you plug your car in at 6 o'clock at night, by the time you come to leave in the morning, you should have a fully charged vehicle. And you won't need to, unless you're traveling significant distance, you won't need to charge up again within the next few days. So where the column is, the unit is attached at approximately shoulder height. There are indoor options available as well. These weren't considered right at the start of our project because they weren't approved. But now they have been. That if any issues arise, or if we'd like to trial the indoor option, we can do that also and adapt the scheme itself. As I mentioned, the three columns located on Park Avenue will allow for contactless payment. So payment itself, users will have a choice of setting up an account through the app of Joju Limited, or also you can use a QR code on the side of the unit, which you can scan with your phone, and it will take you to a pay-as-you-go access. The cost of the charge point, to use the charge point, sorry, is it is 25 pence per kilowatt hour. This is in line with many other schemes up and down the country. I believe in Portsmouth it's at 26 pence, and Liverpool it's in 27 pence, so we're at a competitive price, and hopefully we're not putting people off with that price as well. So the project delivery, the County Council obtained grant funding from OZEV, and the charge points themselves are manufactured by City EV. The installation commenced on the 1st of March 2021. So if you were to walk around the area now, you would see some white boxes attached to the street lighting columns. The front of the units will be attached in the coming weeks, and the scheme should be fully operational by the end of March. The County Council conducted a leaflet drop to all to all residents within the scheme area, notifying them of the works, and also we've signposted to our new website and shared the contact details for the new County Council shared inbox. In terms of user support, there's a 24/7 call centre for users to if they experience any problems, to call, also with an email address. I believe it's 95% of all issues which happen with electric vehicle charge points can be solved remotely via Joju Limited's app and any other back office system. So you should be able to have your problem solved there and then. Only in the event which it can't, due to a technical fault, will an engineer then be called out to site. A sign will also be placed onto the street lighting columns, roughly the size of an A4 piece of paper, shown here on the right hand side, and to notify residents of the new charge point. So part of this scheme, although it is to service existing EV owners, but it is also primarily there to promote EVs and charge points themselves, to give confidence to people that they can access a charge to their vehicle if they don't have access to off-street parking. And we expect, although we anticipate the usage of these charge points to be lower to begin with, we do expect them to increase as and when more EVs are purchased, and with that impending 2030 ban on the sales of new petrol and diesel vehicles, we hope and expect an influx of EVs within the area. The scheme will be monitored continuously, and assessments will be made towards the end of the trial to determine the effectiveness based upon usage and uptake of EVs within the area. A little bit more on what we've been doing. We've launched a new website which is aimed at increasing residents' awareness of EVs. So our old website was a bit bland, a bit fragmented. So we've tried to come up with something fresh and something new, and it all links together to the districts and what they're doing as well. Which includes things like where to charge your vehicle, and also further information on our pilot schemes in both Winchester and Eastleigh. As part of forming our policy, and understanding, we are asking residents to complete our EV demand survey. This was launched on the 5th of August last year, and so far we've had over 300 responses, which has helped us to try and determine where areas of demand will be set to increase over the next few years. We've asked questions such as when people's current thoughts on EVs, and if they plan to purchase an EV, and by pinpointing exactly where these charge points, where people expect to have an EV in the coming years, we're able to try and form a map of where we expect a significant demand in the near future. So on the top right hand side, that's what you're greeted with when you go to our EV demand survey. There are some fancy images to the side of that from Google Sheets, but that wasn't appropriate for this. And also we're aware that although the pilot scheme does not service all of Winchester, in recognition of this, the County Council has published guidance on how to safely charge your vehicle from home using a cable protector. So we're not, although the scheme obviously benefits those which live directly within the catchment area and those which can visit it on the weekend outside of the parking restriction timeframe, we don't want to prevent people from taking up an EV, and as long as you can adhere to the guidance on our website, then you're more than welcome to charge your electric vehicle from your home. And yeah, here's our contact details. So thank you. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to help.
Lovely.
How do I stop? There we go.
Okay.
Should have stopped. Fantastic.
Thank you both. That was brilliant. Thank you. You might know Hyde is one of the areas that I represent, and I know the people who live there are looking forward to this trial. I would love an EV myself, but I live in a street that has no parking on the side of the street that the houses are on, and all the parking is on the other side. So I don't think I'll be getting one just yet, but we'll see as the technology develops. Now, you have been quite popular already. So Councillor Ferguson, you've got the first question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Riley, for your presentation. I'm also a ward councillor for the area that's got this trial going in, and it is really exciting. My questions are around, I wondered if you'd done any assessment before you put the trial in of how many people actually have EV charging points in that area. I know we had the lampposts, which made it a good area, but I just wondered how many EVs there were already there. And I know you say you're going to look at the success of the trial by looking at usage and uptake. I understand the trials for an 18-month period. Does that give people enough time to be influenced by the fact that there now is a charger to make the change, because people tend to change their cars on cycles or when they're worn out or they have a reason to, and if they can afford to? Is that really enough time to judge whether it's had an impact and help make that modal shift away from diesel and petrol to electric?
Okay, Ben, would you want me to take those?
You can start and I'll fill in the gaps.
Very good. Anyway, I'm glad to hear that people feel it's exciting, which is great news. Total number of EVs in Hampshire probably is only around 1,000. There's about 21,000 in the UK. In the Hyde area, I suspect there's only a handful at the moment, but really the aim of the pilot scheme is to encourage the transition to electric vehicles. I think you mentioned the trial will be for 18 months. The OZEV conditions of the grant that we've been given is that the charge points have to be in place for 3 years. Okay. So that's really a minimum. I suspect they will last longer than that. 5, 7, possibly even 10 years before they become obsolete. But this is a rapidly changing technology. Vehicles, the batteries, the charging methods, the speed of charging, it's all changing very quickly. And to give you an idea, last year there was a third increase in charge points going in. So the number of charge points is rapidly expanding. And our charge points are slow compared with others. There's generally slow, fast or rapid. And there's been growth in slow chargers, quite significant growth, but rapid chargers are coming up quite quickly as well. And there's around, I think, 3,000 of those in the UK at the moment. So it's difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen. And we're doing the pilot trial to hopefully learn lessons of, you know, how popular they are, what we need to provide in other areas, that kind of thing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, in terms of actual numbers of EVs in the area at the moment, part of the condition for applying for the grant from OZEP was that you had to demonstrate that the surrounding area met their criteria of not having access to off-street parking, but also to include information based upon any communications which we've done with the public. So our survey, which was launched in August, did highlight that there was, I believe, 4 EVs on King Alfred Terrace, which is included within our catchment area. And then there was also where we've asked for people for when they plan to purchase an EV, I believe 11 charge points were requested within this catchment area. And I know 11 doesn't sound like it's massive, but in compared to 300 for the whole county, 11 is quite a condensed area. And although we found out prior to that, Winchester is a very popular area for, or perceived popular area for charge points. Due to the physical aspects of the site, this is the best area that we can run quite a quick pilot scheme without adding significant delay or cost to the overall scheme. So that's been our thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Becker. I was going to ask the question about the 18-month trial as well, so Councillor Ferguson put me to the post there. So, but I'm really pleased that they'll be there for at least 3 years, because you know, as the point that Councillor Ferguson made was that people tend to change their cars because there's a real reason that can happen over a number of years. I want in your final slide, you had a photograph of the cable protector going across the pavement.
Let's turn off your camera.
Was a these it's sadly.
Sorry, Councillor Thompson, we can't hear you. Your internet is breaking up. Perhaps you want to pop your question into the chat, or can we put a message in the chat to Lucille that we can't hear her? While we're doing that, Councillor Lurney, did you want to ask your question?
Thank you. I suspect it may be similar to Councillor Thompson's, but we'll find out when she comes back on the line. I suspect you've got a slightly unrepresentative audience here, in that I know a significant number of people in this meeting already do have electric cars. Certainly I've fallen over the charging cable to ours a few times, even though it's just in the drive. So I really welcome the fact that you're talking about having guidelines put forward for people to be able to charge them where they do need to put cables across the pavement. Can I ask how you're going to publicise those guidelines, and are there ways in which we can help you do that?
Well, the guidelines for charging from your domestic supply, where you run cables across the footway out to your vehicle, have been in place for quite a while. I'm not quite sure how long, maybe 12 to 18 months, something like that. The information is on our website, repeated on our new electric vehicle website, but previously it was on Hunt's web and could be found under electric vehicles. It's really aimed at handling a problem that was already happening, where people were running cables out to their electric vehicles, running it through the letterbox to their domestic supply of the hall, and it's really just making the situation safer. The responsibility lies with the the owner of the car, householder, who's actually running the cables across the footway. And I think when we first provided the advice and guidance, it wasn't possible to insure against this, but a number of insurance companies now provide cover for trips and falls caused by trailing cables. The guidance that we provide for our own electric vehicle charge points is very similar, and states that people need to be sort of sensible in placing the cables and place them in such a way that we don't cause problems, whereby they may be found negligent for causing trips by badly placed cables. So it's early days yet. We haven't got any of these charge points operating. We hope there's not going to be a problem. Generally speaking, nationally, this hasn't been raised as a problem, and quite a few authorities are interested in our cable protector guidance as well. So I'm not aware of any issues coming out of that either, so at present. But you know, I think clearly if every household has an EV and every household has a cable protector, then it's going to cause problems for pedestrians, just by the sheer number that people would encounter. And then I think the county council might need to step in and say, okay, well, we're not going to allow that anymore. So, but that may take many years. We'll have to see.
Right, no, thank you for that. Certainly I live in an area where all the lamp posts are at the back of pavements, so we're not going to be able to use this form of charging point, and there are a significant number of cables already put across the pavements with, I mean, I haven't seen it yet where somebody hasn't put a cable protector over it when it's actually running across the pavement, but obviously it's something that we need to keep an eye out for, so thank you.
Yes, had a meeting earlier on. We hold these regular district liaison meetings with our district colleagues, and we mentioned linking websites, and certainly it would be possible for the City Council's electric vehicle webpage to link to ours, where people can find that kind of guidance.
Yeah, it's specifically on our, we've got a tab which is for charging at home, so we've got for information for people that do have access for driveways, so links to the government schemes for the home charge scheme, and where they can go and learn out more about that. But then also the guidance then for on street, if you don't have access to the parking, is there as well. So it is quite easy to find, a lot more easy to find now than it used to be on the old website. So thankfully, in terms of anything for helping publicise, it would be mainly just to get people to our new webpage, which should help alleviate any fears or any questions which people may have.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you, and I think in answering that question you have answered Councillor Thompson's question, which was whether you are supporting cable protectors across pavements. Councillor Hiscock, you've got a comment.
I do. Thank you very much. I'd just like to thank the officers for coming this evening and explaining to everybody what it's all about. I've certainly met Andy before on site, and it was good to meet him. And I must report back that generally it's been well received by the residents of Hyde. They like it. I've had several comments and people are saying right now's the time to buy an electric car, which I think is probably part of the purpose. The only reservations people have is how they're going to maintain their parking spaces outside their homes, but I think that's inevitable. I don't think it's an answer, and I think they're pragmatic enough to understand that that's well, that could be the time for them to buy their cars, really. I think probably if they want to do that, but I think it's positive. It's going to be an interesting trial, and I'm very glad that it's happened on my patch. And it's happened in Winchester, so thank you both very much for that.
Okay.
Yes. Again, thank you for coming along tonight, and thank you for, as Councillor Hiscock has said, performing the trial in this part of Winchester. I think, as you have said, it's a good spot to be carrying out the trial. We've just had the Tesla dealership open up just up the road from Hyde, so there must be self-evident there must be interest in this sort of work here. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for the presentation.
That's okay.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda, Mr. Ingram, you've been waiting very patiently to present on the air quality SPD. So thank you.
No problem at all. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep. I think Matthew, you're going to be driving my presentation this evening. Is that correct? If not, I can share my screen. Thank you. So the presentation I'm delivering this evening, I'm conscious that it's the third presentation of the evening, so I'm sort of anticipating you might have presentation fatigue at this point. So the presentation I'm putting to you this evening is about the air quality supplementary planning document, which is currently out to public consultation. It went out on the 17th of February and will be running to the 12th of April in line with the public consultation for the local plan that's in formulation at the moment. Before I start, I would also like just to mention that I have my colleague on the call, Phil Tidridge, who has been the spearhead of air quality, the air quality agenda for Winchester City Council for a very long time. So if there's any particular technical questions on what can initially appear as a technical document, then Phil is in the wings and I'll bring him in at the end of the presentation to help me out. So next slide, please, Matthew. I'll canter through these first slides because I'm conscious that many of you have already received air quality presentations over the years, so you're an informed audience. But the presentation is actually put together for the public consultation, so it assumes that there's a sort of a low level of understanding on issues of air quality. So I'll just run through these very quickly. Poor air quality can or is a result of a number of factors and emission sources, both man-made, which we believe are controllable, and also from natural sources, which are considered non or uncontrollable. And these are broadly split into three sources: transportation, so exhaust emissions, but also wheel and road interaction. There's been quite a lot of studies in recent months, over the last 18 to 24 months, highlighting the fact that a significant amount of particulates are arising from wheel friction, so rubber wear, but also from the friction on brakes. So even if we go completely to an electric fleet, that won't eliminate particulate emissions from transportation. We have static air sources, so industrial processes, obviously construction sites. Agriculture is a huge emitter of particulates, but also domestic boilers and the increasingly popular solid fuel burners, so wood burners in domestic homes, are producing a significant rise in particulate emissions these days. And obviously natural fires, there's a lot more natural fires out in people's gardens, fire pits, chimneys, that kind of thing, all contribute to particulates. And in terms of the natural environment, we have particulates arising from erosion of suspended soils, dusts. Sea salt is another source of particulate emissions, and of course volcanic activity and wildfires. And I've put in there brackets climate change because wildfires are identified as one of the major threats as a result of global warming and climate change. And I've just put at the bottom there that clean air is considered to be a right and not a privilege. We all have to breathe the air at the point that we're standing. We have no choice. No matter how much we earn, we all breathe the air that's around us. So it's not considered to be a right, a privilege. It is a right for all of us to be able to breathe clean air. Next slide, please. And this isn't just about, it's not about clean air, actually, it's about public health. It's nice to have clean air just because it makes for a pleasant environment, but a lot of the legislation is driven through the public health agenda because we've identified that poor air quality affects public health. So in broad terms, it aggravates respiratory and cardiovascular systems in our bodies. Short-term effects being obviously coughing, wheezing, asthma, all the way through to long-term effects of strokes, lung cancer, various respiratory conditions, and of course cardiovascular disease. Again, recent studies have identified that fine particulates, or PM2.5s, can enter the fine tissues deep within the body. So PM2.5s have been found in placental tissue, and also in the brain. And we're only just starting to understand and realise that the health impacts from those very fine particulates. In fact, those studies are still ongoing. We still have a lot to learn. So it's a very, very rapidly changing area of public health. And across the nation, it's estimated that between 35 to 40,000 people will succumb to a premature death as a result of air pollution. And Public Health England studies have extrapolated that data down to the local level. In terms of Winchester, an estimate of 51 deaths, premature deaths per year. I'd just like to draw a difference between the understanding of premature deaths and life years lost, because the number of life years lost as a result of poor air quality is significantly higher. So that really relates to mortality or morbidity rates within the population. So it really is one of the top public health issues of our time. Next slide, please, Matthew. I won't dwell on this slide too much. This just shows the pyramid of effects in terms of the magnitude of impacts and severity of effects. So in terms of lung function, reduced lung function, inflammation and low-level cardio effects, that can affect millions of people, all the way up to actual, as I say, premature deaths measured in the thousands. And obviously in between, we've got respiratory symptoms, school absences, lost work from asthma attacks. So it has a major impact not only on public health, but also the economy. Next slide, please. In terms of setting the scene as to why we're adopting an air quality supplementary planning document, Winchester City Council, in fact every local authority, second tier local authority in the country, has got a legal duty as set down within the Environment Act 95 to review the air quality within its jurisdiction from time to time and cause an assessment to be made, which is kind of fancy language to say we've got to sort of monitor background air quality levels. And where we identify that there's a problem, as determined by the standard set out within the Air Quality Regulations 2000, we have to identify an air quality management area. Winchester declared its first air quality management area back in 2003. And initially declared its AirQMA on the basis of both nitrogen dioxide and PM10s. The Environment Act also sets out other pollutants, benzene and sulfur dioxide. We don't have a problem with those in our area. They tend to be associated more with industrial, much larger conurbations. But the box in the top right hand corner there just sets out the national standards to which we are all working to. Nitrogen dioxide levels, thank you, Matthew. There's a national standard where we are permitted to exceed on 18 times per annum an hourly mean of 200 micrograms. So that's acute impacts of nitrogen dioxide. And for PM10s, there's an acute standard of 50 micrograms over a 24-hour mean, which can be exceeded 35 times. I'm not going to get into that too much. The bit I really want you to focus on is the red line. We achieve all the standards aside from the red line, which is the annual mean for nitrogen dioxide. And the annual mean is set at 40 micrograms per metre cubed. And as I'll show you in a slide in a few moments, we're hovering at or around that standard. Just really finishing the dates there. So we adopted our first air quality action plan in 2006, and we are working to our current iteration of the air quality action plan, which we adopted back in 2017. One of the challenges I have this year is to review that air quality action plan, and we'll be looking to adopt a reviewed and updated plan either at the end of this year or in the early part of 2022. Next slide, please, Matthew. Thank you. And this is just a slide showing the trends since 1997 for our annual mean nitrogen dioxide levels within the city. The top purple line shows St George's Street, and the blue line, which we were originally monitoring for background nitrogen dioxide levels, as you can see, consistently was found to be below the standard of 40 micrograms per metre cube, which is indicated by the horizontal red line. Really, the overall trend is what I'm interested in drawing your attention to here. Early in 1997, levels were considerably higher. There's been a gradual trend drop towards the national standards, and in fact back in, I think it was 2015, 2016, we were actually compliant with the standards, and then we had an increase again, and then a couple of years ago we exceeded the standard. So we're hovering at or around about the standard at the moment. The sudden drop at the end is indicative of 2020 and the impacts of COVID. Certainly in the initial lockdown, there was a significant drop of road traffic going through and accessing Winchester town centre, and that has affected the overall annual mean for 2020. And although it says November at the end of that graph, we have subsequently managed to validate the full year's data. Phil kindly did that through one of our contractors, and I can say with confidence that the levels that are shown in this graph are actually pretty accurate. There's only a slight upward tweak, taking into account the full 12 months of last year. However, I think we've all noticed that there has been a, well, I'd say gradual, if not a significantly rapid rise in traffic levels throughout the sort of second half of the current lockdown. And certainly my own personal experience on the occasions that I do venture out and drive on the motorways, I'm pretty much got very little difference between pre-lockdown or pre-COVID levels and current levels of traffic. So we fully expect nitrogen dioxide level readings to go up again for 2021. Next slide, please. The Air Quality Action Plan, I won't dwell on this too long, sets out 9 core measures and 9 complementary measures. I won't go through each and every one, we don't have time, but as you can see highlighted in the core measures, one of the expectations is to develop an air quality supplementary planning document. And that was identified through the working group to, the language I tend to use is future-proof the development of Winchester to ensure that air quality is a material consideration, and to ensure that air quality is not adversely affected by such developments. So, bit of a mouthful, but I think you get the impression as to why we are looking to adopt the supplementary planning document. And just at the bottom there, just tying in with the last presentation, some of the soft measures. One is the electric vehicle charging points. I will toot my trumpet here and say that we are very near completing the rollout of all the electric vehicle charging points in our car parks as set out in the EV policy or strategy, sorry, that we adopted back in, I think it was 2018, 2019. And Councillor Murphy, we did a photo shoot last week outside our first rapid charging point up at the Worthy Lane car park outside of the Winchester Hotel. So we're very nearly completing that. Next slide, please. So onto the SPD proper. The SPD itself, its purpose is to improve air quality and reduce public health impacts. Public health being as I say, the primary objective. It's also intended to attract investment and clean technology and sustainable travel and renewable energy within the Winchester town area, and hopefully that will roll out across the district. And to provide clarity and consistency for planners and developers and local communities on expectations towards air quality when considering new developments. And in terms of how it intends to achieve that, it will mitigate future negative impacts on air quality in Winchester's air quality management area, either from the new developments and their consequential use, or to occupants and users of developments arising from a change of use within areas of existing poor air quality. And that is within the air quality SPD area, which I'll come on to and show you in a moment. And all of this, of course, supports Winchester City Council's climate emergency declaration by reducing its carbon emissions. So there are secondary benefits, although the primary objective is to improve air quality and obviously reduce public health impacts. There is a synergy with a reduction in carbon emissions as well. So it's a kind of 2-for-1 deal, if you like. Next slide, please. The air quality SPD is set in the context of various national policy frameworks. So the National Planning Policy Framework, particularly as it's a planning document, states that it sets down air quality as one of its key governing principles, and seeks to address the impacts on climate change, renewable energy and air quality and green infrastructure, amongst other criteria. Drilling that down into our local plan also refers to air quality and states that development will only be permitted whether it achieves an acceptable standard of environmental quality, and then sets down ambient air quality as one of those particular criteria. So it's very much set within the context of local planning policy, national planning policy, but also, as I say, national air quality strategies. And as Ben mentioned in the previous presentation, he mentioned the Road to Zero strategy, which was recently tightened up by the government because it originally had a 2035 expectation that there'd be no standard combustion engine vehicles sold after 2035. That's now been brought to 2030, which is only 9 years away, and that will, I think, go in a blink of an eye. So that's not to say that internal combustion engines will disappear from our roads come 2030. You just won't be able to buy a new one. Next slide, please. So on to the assessment methodology itself within the SPD. The level of assessment is the initial criteria of expectation, and it sets thresholds within the SPD. And they're set in the context of the Town and Country Planning Regulation definition of major development, and these are blended with air quality considerations. And that sets down relevant exposure sites, which includes new development within the SPD area, and includes long-term exposure sites such as residential, educational, healthcare and commercial development where public will be spending 1 hour or more. And notably, this includes outdoor patios. So if there's a commercial development like a restaurant which is expecting people or would like people to sit outside near a busy road, they will be captured by this SPD. Next slide, please, Matthew. And this is probably one of the more interesting slides of the presentation. Members will have a keen eye on. So you can see on the left-hand side, it sets out the proposed SPD policy area. And Matthew, I don't know if you can drill into that a little bit for me so we can see that a bit clearer. So the red line indicates the Winchester's major urban development area as currently existing within the local plan. And the blue line, the sort of bubbly cloud, if you like, that's on the outside of that is effectively the red line plus a 1 kilometre buffer. So that really is the SPD area. So any development which takes place inside of that blue line will be captured by this SPD proposal. If we can just zoom out and then zoom back in on the table. This is new tech to me. I didn't know we could do this. So this sets out the proposed thresholds, and this is the key table in the document. So it shows that any residential development of fewer than 10 dwellings, so that's anything between 1 and 9, clearly, they can submit what is called an air quality statement with their planning application. And I'll come on to a statement in a minute. Any residential development which has got 10 or more dwellings will be required to submit an air quality assessment. And again, I'll come along to that in a moment. Or in terms of other parameters, not just in terms of numbers of units, if there's a residential site of less than 0.5 of a hectare in size, again, that can submit an air quality statement, or if it's over that parameter, it must submit an assessment. If it's partly or wholly non-residential, in other words, if it's a residential commercial mix, or if it's purely commercial, and it's over 1,000 square meters in floor space, or if it creates 10 or more new parking spaces, it must produce an air quality statement as part of its planning application. Excuse me. Or again, if it's got a combustion or heating plant associated with the development with a combined net thermal output of greater than 1 megawatt, it must submit an air quality statement. So if I just come on to the statements, sorry, assessment, I meant to say in the last moment there. If we go on to the statements then, Matthew, next slide. Oh, sorry, just before going to that, there's also receptor sites. I mentioned earlier that this SPD also intends to capture change of use. So if there is a change of use within an area of already pre-identified poor air quality, then again, it's captured by the SPD. So the developer will have to either submit a statement or an assessment to identify what the quantitative impacts are going to be to the users of that development. So if it's a commercial development that's being changed into residential, they will have to do an air quality assessment to identify likely impacts to the new residents. And specifically, certain locations within the AirQMA have been identified as being particularly high, and these are Jury Street, Romsey Road and St George's Street. So any development on those routes that propose ground floor habitable rooms within 5 metres of those roads, a full air quality assessment will be required. New slide, please. So in terms of the statements, these are the developments, the smaller developments, if you like, either under 10 dwellings or under half a hectare. There's a checklist of requirements that we set down, and the developer needs to submit a statement to show the planning authority how it intends to meet these requirements. And there's the list there in front of you. We are currently proposing that no solid fuel burners, wood or coal domestic heating appliances or open fireplaces will be allowed as part of that development within the SPD area. We are requiring that they provide secure weatherproof cycle storage, and there's standards set out within the SPD. All boilers provided must meet a minimum standard of less than 40 micrograms NOx emissions per kilowatt hour. And there must be, tying in with the previous presentation, at least one electric vehicle charge point provided for private off-road parking. So if there's a driveway associated with the development, then they must provide an EVCP as part of the development. And where there isn't a dedicated space and there's only communal parking, then again they should provide one EVCP per dwelling. So where you've got shared parking, then there needs to be a bank of EVCPs, one per parking space. And also we expect them to provide comprehensive details of public transport options to be given to the purchasers of the new dwellings, so that they immediately have that jolt, that information to sort of say, well, actually, I can get into Winchester really fast by bus. I don't have to drive my car. Next slide, please. Policy 4 is the air quality assessments. These, as I say, are expected of the larger developments, 10 or more dwellings, residential of in excess of half a hectare, or mixed developments over 1,000 metres squared, more than 10 parking spaces or larger heating plant. And any development within the SPD area will be expected to, well, it can be required by the policy to submit an air quality assessment. And this is a desktop study of some detail identifying the expected impacts of air quality arising from the development as set out within stated guidance, and the stated guidance is from the Institute of Air Quality Managers, and also the I've forgotten what the other standard is now off the top of my head. I'll come back to that in a minute. And Appendix E provides broad cost benefit versus air quality benefit guides with prescribed mitigation. So there's a bit in the SPD about sort of giving a bit of a steer to developers as to what is likely to be expected. There's also a bit in here for the larger developments to say that they need to also consider a delivery service plan or construction traffic management plan for the construction phase, because, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, construction is a significant emitter of particulates. So that is also captured as part of the SPD and expectation. And again, there's decision trees to assist the developers in Appendix B and C on how to go about that. Next slide, please. And of course, none of this is worth the paper it's written on unless there is an expectation of mitigation. So for the larger developments, the study that they undertake would also set out proposed mitigations. If they identify significant air quality impacts, then they need to understand how they go to mitigate those. And again, that's set down within the Institute of Air Quality Management guidance on what can be done. And that will be submitted as part of the planning application. And of course, with any planning application process, the determination is to either approve or refuse. and the expectation is if the mitigation doesn't meet expected standards, we would refuse the planning authority has the jurisdiction to refuse the application. There was quite a lot of conversation, I might add, in terms of the development of the SPD as to whether or not there needs to be what I call the polluter pay option, which is if they can't mitigate to the required standards, they could, through SIL payments, they could effectively pay their way out of their obligations in terms of their air quality impacts. And we did consider that in some detail. There was a lot of debate, and ultimately we decided to abandon that approach because it was considered that it would cause more complications in terms of how to manage any monies that were brought in as a result of that particular process. So this is the distillation of a lot of conversation. And I've just set down there that Section 106 agreements can also be explored as part of this process. So if there's any off-site developments or offers that can be put forward by the developer which have net air quality benefits elsewhere in the city, they can be considered. But they, as I say, that's Section 106 as opposed to just paying away their duty. And as I say at the end there, if the planning authority not satisfied with the mitigations, they can refuse the application. Next slide, please, Matthew. Just very quickly, conscious of the time, gone past 2 hours, improve air quality, reduce public health impacts. I'm not going to go through all of those. All I would say is that this is going to be the first, if we adopt it, it's be the first air quality SPD that I'm aware of in Hampshire, including the 2 unitary authorities. So it's quite a coup for the City Council if we do adopt this. And notwithstanding, because it is the first iteration, it will be subject to periodic review. And what we've been quite keen to do is look to try and adopt it in advance of the new local plan when it is adopted as a bit of a dry run. And the expectation is that if this proves to be a successful approach, and I hope it will, then either the SPD or a second iteration of it will be adopted as part of the new local plan going forward. And that is my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can direct them to Phil. Phil, do you want to come on camera for me? So, because last time I did this, you didn't, and I forgot you were there, and you got away with it.
While you're doing that, I've just got one question. So I understand from the first slide, there's a consultation going on at the moment. Is that right? So. Correct. So there's a call for all of us to put the word out and get people to participate in that.
Yes, yes, please. I mean, we do have a public presentation tomorrow evening. Unfortunately, I guess because of timing and PERDA, it's compressed the time that we have to do public consultation. So we have one tomorrow, and then that's it, to be honest. So, but that's not to prejudice anybody's ability to obviously go on our web pages and submit their own consultation through the web pages.
Lovely. Thank you. Hi, Phil. Nice to see you. We've got questions from Councillor Hiscock and Councillor Hutchison so far, and I should say that Councillor Scott has now left the meeting.
Okay. Thanks very much, Chair. That's a fantastic presentation. A lot of work's gone into that. It's amazing. Thank you so much for that. Can I ask one question though about the standard, the air quality standard? It's been the same for a long time now. Can I ask you, in your, I don't know whether it's your personal or professional opinion, is it low enough? And do you ever see it being reduced?
I'll do my best to answer that, and if I leave any gaps, Phil can fill those in. But the 40 micrograms per metre cube standard for nitrogen dioxide, the annual mean has stayed pretty consistent. In fact, it's pretty consistent across the national standard, but also aligns with the European standard and the WHO standard. What I didn't mention in the presentation is that we are keenly awaiting the passing of the Environment Bill 2021, which we expect obviously later this year, which will be looking to adopt or give the power to adopt new standards for particulates, PM2.5s, which are currently not a national standard, albeit the government is encouraging local authorities to monitor for them and report back on them. But there will be a set of regulations which we expect by the autumn of 2022, which will set down exactly what those PM 2.5 standards will be. There's currently a sort of a debate going on as to whether or not they're going to adopt the European standard, which is 25 micrograms per metre cubed, or the WHO standard, which is 10 micrograms per metre cubed. Just going to have to move around a moment because the lights have gone off in the office. So at least we're saving our carbon emissions here. Sorry about that.
Stop it getting the DVTs.
You can see me. Phil, is that a thorough answer?
Yeah, I think I'll just add to that, Dave. What we're expecting is some sort of PM 2.5 standard to come out in the foreseeable future out of the Environment Bill. I'm not expecting to see a change in the nitrogen dioxide air quality standard. My best bet is there will be some. It will probably start off with commitment to the European PM 2.5 standard with some sort of aspirational target towards the WHO one. We've got to remember, of course, although we keep mentioning other things, this actual SPD at the moment is an action plan associated with nitrogen dioxide predominantly. That's where it comes from, is to achieve the air quality management areas compliance with NO2. Since there isn't one for PM 2.5, we clearly don't have to achieve that at the moment. So although we're looking to the future, this SPD as it exists is about nitrogen dioxide, but we could look at, as David said, this as being a dry run to inform our future local plan where we might want to try such measures to look at the PM issues and the wider context of the carbon agenda in the future.
Lovely, thanks very much for the answer.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
I lost my connection, or
again, many thanks indeed for a really interesting presentation. That's excellent. I was very interested, particularly in regard to planning applications. You refer to the provision of cycle parking on development sites, and you refer to access to public transport. I wonder what you are also going to be embedding in there to encourage active travel. The vast majority of residential development in Winchester takes place in a very compact city where short journeys can, for the most part, or to a large extent, be carried out through active travel, walking and cycling. And so I was wondering really what was going to be done within this to actually encourage and make sure that connections are going to be made, good provision is going to be made for both walking and cycling from the different sites to key destinations.
In terms of the air quality statement, one of the requirements is that the developer must provide secure weatherproof cycle storage in accordance with the policy, a more detailed policy as set out, which I won't go into, but the principle there is that all units of accommodation should be able to have a location in which they can store bicycles. So we can't, this has to be, I guess, look in the context of other levers that we as a local authority need to start pulling on to encourage our citizens to adopt more active travel. So because it's a planning document, it's all about providing the physical infrastructure to enable those residents to safely store bicycles, for example, so they don't, they're not sort of pulling them and leaving them up in shared stairwells, or not having any option at all of any dry storage for the bikes, for example.
Can I come just back a moment? I appreciate that, and that's obviously much to be welcomed, but also opportunities to create connections to make better routes for pedestrians and cyclists, which are much safer off the main roads. To what extent can that be embedded also in the SPD? You refer to access to public transport, which is great, but that's only one aspect of it. You've got to walk to your bus stops and so forth. So making sure those connections are embedded is a key part of this being successful.
Dave, do you want to answer that?
You can, yeah, I'll let you answer.
I think there's a difference between what we're trying to do for a quick sort of easy checklist of stuff to do for small developments, which is the just the statement. But when it comes to the larger developments, there'll be requirements to do a full air quality assessment. And I know there's no complete buying a way out. That assessment will have to identify mitigation. So that gives us the opportunity to look for the larger developments to be using mitigation to offset, and that will include the sort of things through section 106 to embed the sort of improvements you want for walking and cycling on and off that site. So it will feature and strengthen our ability to ask for those things for the larger developments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, you've got a question.
First of all, I wanted to thank you, David and Phil, for the presentation. I know just how much work has gone into this over quite a long period. So thank you for keeping on going all the way through. My question is, are there other air quality SPDs out there, or is this something where Winchester is sort of leading the way?
There are other air quality SPDs out there on the national stage. So there's the West Sussex Air Quality Group, which has adopted an air quality SPD for the West Sussex region. As you'll be aware, we started off on a similar footing by engaging with Southampton, Eastleigh and New Forest, and sadly it became hard going without going into too much detail, and we sort of broke away because we felt that we weren't making the kind of traction that we needed to make at Winchester. I think the other local authorities in not necessarily Southampton, because they're obviously a big animal and they've got different drivers and expectations for a big city such as Southampton, but our sort of local neighbouring authorities are looking with a keen eye at how this is going to work for us at Winchester. But there are other SPDs up and down the country. There's one, I think, in Dundee. I say the country in Scotland. But yes, there are other. I can't reel off a number of them, but they're not very common. But there are others out there.
Yeah, and Dave, can I add? I think what's different about ours, I would say this because I helped write it, is we've gone down to the micro level. So you will see for a lot of SPDs, they concentrate on big developments. So it's the big development, this is what we need, this is the mitigation we expect. And I know we've put that in. I think I stand to be or sit to be corrected. I've not come across any of trying to tackle this death by 1,000 cuts situation. In other words, lots of little developments having a cumulative effect. So what we've tried to do, which as far as I'm aware is pretty unique, is to try and capture at least doing something about the little developments, as well as having that overall policy for the bigger developments, which I am aware there are SPDs that cover that.
Thank you for your response, and that's really encouraging because we know that in Winchester often our developments happen on infill land, and so they do tend to be smaller, and you're right, it is the cumulative effect of all of those. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we've got any further questions, so thank you both for staying this late. Really is appreciated, and if this is adopted, I think incredibly exciting to be the first in Hampshire, so well done. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a verbal update on the Pavilions project, and I think Mr. Botham is going to be talking about that. So camera moves.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, at the last meeting we brought a report on proposals for 2 pavilions, but what I'll do is just provide an update in relation to the North Walls Pavilion today. Since the last meeting, we have sought revised tender prices based on a wide range of value engineering options. Those prices included some caveats depending on the final list of options that were selected. And since then, also the project board that we talked about at the last meeting has been established, has reviewed those value engineering options and determined a final list, which effectively resets the brief for the project. So we will be we're now in the process of going back to tenderers, asking them to confirm those final prices. The final list that we've selected does include some significant amendments. to the design, which will require a new planning approval. So we are building that into the timetable. However, the key features of the design have been retained to ensure that the building will provide a year-round facility for a range of users. So that was really the key aim. Obviously, the project board are seeking to maintain. Officers have had some positive discussions with Sport England regarding potential for additional funding. And I've been in discussions also with the Pavilion project, and they've confirmed that they're still very active in seeking additional pledges for funding as well, with some success recently as well. So that's all very positive. What I can't give you today is a roadmap through to when a building could start. By the time we meet again in the new cycle, I do hope that we'll have much positive report to be able to give on that basis, and on the progress that we're making with the proposals for the design at the King George V Pavilion as well.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions on that update? No. If not, we'll move on to the informal group update. The chairs of the informal groups, would you like to give a very short, given the time, update on how work has been progressing in your respective areas? Councillor Weir, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, I wanted to give an update on the work of the grants informal groups. We've held 3 rounds panels meeting applicants for small grants this year. That's up to £500 per application. We've made 19 awards, and we have 1 award pending, and we've awarded, if all 20 go through, just under £10,000 this year, which I think is something of a record. It's been really pleasing to support so many Winchester charities and not-for-profit organisations, particularly those who've come forward in the last few months who've been addressing the impact of COVID and assisting vulnerable groups in recovery. So I think we've had a very successful and effective year in the grants informal group. Just a word on the KGV group. As Mr. Botham mentioned, work is continuing around plans for the new pavilion at KGV and the improvements to the sports fields and play areas. The consultation has now been closed on the proposals, and there'll be a report back, I anticipate, to the next town forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go next? Councillor Hiscock, we've heard from you already on, well, we've already heard about the North Walls update, so are you happy to skip that this evening?
Absolutely.
Lovely, thank you. And Councillor Hutchison, did you want to give a quick update on the High Street group?
Yes, I'll give a very quick update on both the High Street group and the Town Forum Planning group. On the High Street group, I think we've been making progress, which is always good to hear, and very pleased about that, on 4 areas. One is the planters. The planters are looking very much better now. They have been replanted, and the form of planting is much denser, so should not attract litter in quite the way was the case before. And linked to that, we're putting in place a much better management arrangement, and hopefully that will also be able to address the staining that is taking place on the bases of the planters. That's something that is still being looked into, but progress is being made on that, which is excellent news. Linked to that also, we've been looking at some signage in conjunction with the bid, and to highlight access to shops, particularly on streets just off the high street, and have been looking at potential for feature lighting in the high street. But most importantly, perhaps Sir Maurice's Covert is back on site, and the work is now in progress to reinstate the gravestones, which will now be within the public access of the tower. And it's anticipated that that should be complete by the end of April, and then work will start on the lighting and the ceiling. So that is all progressing and progressing well, and thank you to everybody who's involved in that. Very quickly on the Winchester Planning Group, we're continuing to work to look to see how we can implement aspects of the vision, and in particular to develop the Town Forum's response, working with officers to the local plan, and that's work in progress at the moment.
Lovely, thank you very much, and great news to hear about St Maurice's Covert. I know that's been a long-standing project of the Town Forum, so it's brilliant to hear that we are hopefully in the final stages of getting the gravestones up and the lighting replaced. So thank you very much for everyone's work on that. The last formal item tonight is the work programme for 2020-2021. Officially, I imagine these items are for the next municipal year, so they're just for noting for tonight, and of course there will be more items, as we've already discussed this evening, coming forward. So are we able to note that for the record?
Noted.
Thank
Noted.
you. Thank you. So that concludes the formal items for tonight. Thank you all for staying later than the 2 hours allocated, and thank you all for all your hard work this year. This is the last meeting of the Town Forum for this year before we go into Purdah, but I'd just like to pass on my thanks to everyone for everything we've done this year, and in quite different circumstances. I'm sure everyone remembers that the Town Forum meeting was probably the last meeting held of the council before we went into lockdown last year, so thank you very much. I think we've done quite a lot in the year that we've had, so thank you everyone. Good evening.
And before you close, Councillor Becker, is Councillor Thompson here? I won't put my camera on in case my system crashes again, but just to thank you very much for the way you've chaired these meetings throughout the year. You've been fantastic. You've done it with charm and patience, so well done, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you. And thank you officers for all your support as well this year and staying late in the office. So thank you all. Thanks. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Night all.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.